Welcome to Inverse Happy Hour. I'm Veronica Roth. I'm the author of the Divergent series and the Carve the Mark series, and most recently, Chosen Ones, which is my first book for an adult audience. Chosen Ones is about a group of people who defeated a Dark Lord figure known as the Dark One when they were teenagers, and they saved the world. And now it's 10 years later, and they are still dealing with the repercussions of what happened to them, both in the world around them and, psychologically. So the part I'm going to read to you is from chapter 3, which is our 5 chosen ones have been summoned to attend the dedication of a monument to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of the Dark One being defeated. And so they have to go and, kiss babies and be public figures, basically. And this is what happens. Okay. Chapter 3. The mayor's speech was a collection of trite phrases about moving on from grief and the triumph of good over evil and honoring the dead. Halfway through, Inez leaned over to whisper a quote from Friday Night Lights. "Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose." And Sloane had to cover her mouth so no one in the crowd could tell that she was laughing. Albie faked a coughing fit, and Esther elbowed Inez in the ribs. Matt schooled his face into a serious expression. For just a moment, Sloane felt like she had gotten something back. Cameras flashed everywhere as the speech concluded, and the crowd applauded. Sloane joined them, clapping until her palms started to itch. Next came a series of firm handshakes, and finally it was time for the chosen ones to bless the 10 years monument with their holy footsteps, or whatever the hell Mayor Clayton had said about it. Sloane wondered if she could use that as an excuse to take off her shoes, because they were pinching her toes. Surely you couldn't bless something with uncomfortable high heels on. The land around the metal box had been paved with concrete. Sloane walked down the steps of the stage and felt the warmth of it through the soles of her shoes. She felt like she was standing on the surface of a gray sea, the monument a bronze island 100 yards ahead of her. It was the only spot of warm light in the midst of desolation, ethereal, mirage-like. Staring at it, she was surprised to find tears in her eyes. In time, the bronze would age, its luster giving way to flat green tarnish. Their memory of what happened would flatten too and become dull, and the monument would be forgotten, something for school field trips and bus tours for the history-minded. And she would tarnish too, always famous, but always fading, the way old movie stars were, carrying ghosts of their younger selves in their faces. It was a strange thing to know with certainty that you had peaked. She walked in Albie's wake to the box, the others at her back. She couldn't help but look across the river to where Matt had stood during their last stand, the golden bow held aloft, casting supernatural light on his face, one of a handful of moments in which she had fallen in love with him. There was a narrow opening in the wall for people to step inside, and Albie went straight through it. Inez was about to follow him in, but Sloane stopped her with a hand. "Let's give him a second," she said. They all fit together in different ways, knew different pieces of each other best. Esther knew how to make Albie laugh. Inez could almost read his mind, and Matt knew how to get him to talk. But Sloane was the Albie expert on his bad days, and there was no way today wasn't one of them. "This thing is totally gonna get peed on," Inez said. "You don't need to fill every silence," Matt said. "I'm gonna go in and see if he's okay," Sloane said. "Give me a minute or two." Matt said, "Sure." "Yeah, it'll give Esther time to figure out the right camera angle or whatever," Inez said. Esther smacked her arm and then took out her phone. Sloane fled the scene before Esther could talk her into another selfie, finding the gap in the wall and slipping into the monument. Tiny letters, the name of every person killed by the Dark One, were carved out of the metal walls. It had taken years to find and cut them all, according to the artist, and most names were so small you could barely read them. The artist had set up panels of light behind the metal sheets so that each name glowed. It was like staring at a night sky somewhere deep in the wilderness, where pollution didn't interfere with the light of the stars. Albie stood in the middle of the cube, staring at one of the wall panels. "Hey," she said to him. "Hey," he said. "Pretty in here, isn't it?" "The bronze was a good choice, almost cozy this way," she said. "Did you find your dad's name?" "No," he said. "Needle, haystack." "Maybe we can ask the artist." Albie shrugged. I think the point is, you're not supposed to be able to see the individual names. You're just supposed to get an impression of how many there were. So many it stopped mattering, Sloane thought. She already knew the number of people lost to the Dark One. Anything from 100 to 1 million was just a number, her mind too limited to really comprehend it. I like it this way, Albie said. It reminds me that we're just a handful of people who lost something among thousands of other people who lost something. Not hurting any more or less than any of the families of those people. He gestured to the panel in front of him. Albie was only 30, but his hair had gone feather light and was receding at the temples. There were creases in his forehead, too, deep enough that she had noticed them. Time was wearing on him. I'm tired of being special, Albie said with a shaky laugh. I'm tired of being celebrated for the worst thing that ever happened to me. Sloane went to stand next to him, close enough that their arms touched. She thought of the stack of government documents in the bottom drawer of her desk, of Rick Lane, the journalist, discussing her like she was a slab of meat at a butcher, of the nightmares that chased her from sleeping to waking. Yeah, she said through a sigh. I know what you mean. Or at least, she thought she did. But when she watched Albie's hand tremble as he brought it up to scrub at his face, she wondered if she really did know. Knock, knock, Esther said. She was holding up her phone, at a flattering angle, of course. As she walked into the monument, her hair arranged perfectly over her shoulders. She turned so the shot included Albie and Sloane. Say hi to my Insta followers, guys. Is this live? Sloane asked. No, Esther said. Sloane glanced at Albie and then put up both her middle fingers, while Albie put up his palms to his cheeks to make a loud farting noise. Inez walked in after Esther, looking nervous, to see Sloane waving her middle fingers around Albie's face. Esther put the phone down, scowling. This was supposed to be a live capture of my first time through the 10 Years Monument, she said. Now I'm going to have to do it again and act like it's the first time. She stormed out, passing Matt on her way. What did I miss? He said. Hold on, Albie said, holding a finger to his lips. Esther came in again, the phone held up and away from her face, her eyes wide in faux wonder as she looked at all the glowing names. Albie darted forward and tipped his head so he was in the shot with Esther and said, This is her second time doing this. Don't let her lie to you. Esther shoved Albie away and put her phone down. What is wrong with you guys? Us? You're the one who basically has a phone grafted to your hand, said Sloane. You're worse than Matt. Matt put up his hands. I am not involved in this. I'm not the first person to use social media, Esther said. It's my job. You don't have to be so freaking judgy about it. This is supposed to be a somber occasion, Matt pointed out, and it could have been a good bonding experience. Recording it does not take away from its somberness, Esther said. It does when you're recording from the ideal selfie angle, Inez said, miming holding up a phone. She posed with her hip thrust to the side. Here's the names of the dead, and also my hot ass. Sloane couldn't suppress a giggle. It came out, so high-pitched, she clapped a hand over her mouth, embarrassed. Slony macaroni just made a girly noise, Albie said, eyebrows raised. Don't you dare call me that, she said. Don't pretend we haven't all seen you in those home videos Cameron made, Esther said. You may be into this tough girl don't give a fuck thing now, but deep inside you, you will always be the kid who did a dance to Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend in a tutu made of tinfoil. Sloane cursed her late brother's video camera and was about to respond when Matt spoke up. I found Bert. Bert's name wasn't really Robert Robertson, of course. He had told them his real one in confidence a few months before his death, so they could find him if they lost contact with him. But none of them thought of him as Evan Kowalczyk. To them, he would always be Bert. They all moved to stand behind Matt and followed the line of his finger to a small name, Evan Kowalczyk, all in capital letters. She had no idea how Matt had found it among all the names, all the panels. It was like finding a particular tree in a forest of identical trees. Matt's hand fell away and Robert's name disappeared into the wall again, blurring together with all the others. All these losses, each one for nothing. A Dark Lord and his insatiable hunger. I wonder what he'd be doing now, Matt said. Probably refusing to enjoy his retirement, Inez replied. Sloane turned toward the door before her expression gave her away. She didn't want to tell them what she had read in the files she had gotten from the FOIA request. Hints of a Bert she had never known. Let's go, Sloane said. They're going to start wondering where we all are.
Wow.
There you go.
That was great. There's just so much detail, so many little nuggets there that I'm curious about. You know, the plot is very dense. That was awesome. And so that was Chosen Ones, which is out now. You can buy it.
Yes.
And this is Inverse Happy Hour. We're live with Veronica Roth, and we're going to take some questions. We got a bunch already that I'm going to read through. I know you got a lot of fans, obviously, from your previous work, and someone wanted to ask, how is the book like or not like Divergent?
I have been thinking of it as kind of a call and response, actually, because Divergent is a chosen one story, you know, which is, they're common in sci-fi and fantasy, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all chosen one stories. And Divergent is one of them because the main character, Triss, has these special qualities that set her apart and make her like destined to save the city, you know, so chosen one. And you know, obviously that series ends in a particular way that I will not spoil, but people often asked me what would have happened if it hadn't ended that way. That's not like a question I can answer because I end things the way I feel they should end and I don't have other possibilities in mind. Otherwise, I probably would have done those because, you know, I got myself into some like muck when I ended it the way I did. So, so I can't answer it specifically, but I did think like after someone goes through something like what a chosen one goes through, like I don't know that they would be well adjusted or healthy. So, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to write Chosen Ones. I wanted to explore that aftermath a little bit. So they seem related in that way to me.
Nice. You know, I didn't even realize that Chosen Ones was a term like that, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
A lot of people are asking if this is a series or a standalone, or if you know at this point. So I'm curious if you thought about it.
Yeah. It has a sequel, and I think that's it because I love a duology.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. Do you plan to return to YA?
I definitely don't think this should be interpreted as me like leaving it behind.
Sure.
Like right now this is my focus, but I haven't made decisions about what I'm gonna do next, but I don't see leaving YA forever or anything like that. Yeah.
Good. Someone wanted to ask specifically about the book covers, and I did notice the book cover is so beautiful in this one.
Here, I'll show it again.
Oh, yeah. It's that, and then like the under the flap is also awesome, right? Yeah. So someone wants to just ask, how do you? I mean, I guess what's your involvement? How do you think about how you want your book to look physically?
Well, most authors don't get a whole lot of say in book covers, but because I have enjoyed such success with Divergent, I have like contract approvals over book covers. So,
Nice.
mostly, though, what that means is that the publisher listens to my feedback, as you hope they always would, and they have to. But we've never had to like have that fight. I also trust them, so I might know what I like in a book cover, but I don't necessarily know what's best for the book. So the cover communicates what kind of book you're going to get when you open it. And so, you know, like a really hard sci-fi cover might have like a CGI spaceship on it, and that tells you what you're in for.
Yeah.
And so the real trick with this book was figuring out how to show you what you're in for. So, I think, I mean, it's beautiful. It's Jim Tierney who has done a lot of amazing covers, including the Dune repackages. So I was just like totally bananas over it. But I think it's pretty perfect. But it took us a while to get there. Like a lot of different directions, a lot of imagery from the book, you know, that didn't work so well on the cover. Yeah.
Nice. That's I think it's nice. It's very like it's simple and elegant, and I like it a lot. Especially I think for like a first first adult novel, it works very well.
Yeah. It communicates like whimsy.
Yeah.
You know, it's shiny, but not too much.
Someone wants to ask, how long did it take you to write the first draft of Chosen Ones?
Well, I like just looked back at my email and I had written a synopsis in December of 2017, and I started writing like one version of the rough draft right after that. But then I made some like dramatic changes to it, so I had to start over again. And that part took, the better part of a year, I think. And that's just the rough draft. So, I edited for 6 months after that, I think.
Nice. That's not bad. Um, any tips for, you got a lot of questions from people who obviously, admire you, want to be a writer. Any tips for aspiring writers in general, and also for people who want to plan out a series? How do you approach that?
Well, for aspiring writers in general, I recommend that you do as much research as you can into the industry that you would like to enter. So I think a lot of people get eager and they want to throw themselves in, and they also get desperate. They want to take whatever's offered, and definitely don't do that. You should know your value. And I have a friend, Sarah Ennie, who does a podcast called First Draft Pod, and she's just done like a heap of interviews with editors and marketing people and agents and everyone in the whole publishing industry. And those will be coming out soon, and they will be so informative. I participated in a couple of those. And the reason I recommend that specifically is that there's not a whole lot of information. There's a lot of information about how to get published. There isn't a whole lot of information about what happens after. And I think it's crucial to understand both. So do your research. Be humble enough to accept criticism. It's very important for helping you to grow. But also have the confidence to know what is good in your work and to fight for that, because you have to understand what you're offering, and not change those things, but be flexible to change, the stuff around it or how it's executed. So that's like for aspiring authors. There was a part 2 to that question, wasn't there? Planning a series?
Yeah, how do you plan out a whole series?
Well, I'm kind of learning as I go.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to outline. Yeah, I know people have different schools of thought about this, but I don't know how you plan a series without outlining.
Sure.
So for me, that's how it's done. So I like to make story there's a story shape graph that's like this. So like rising action. Oh, I should do it the other way. Rising action, climax, falling action, end. And I map my books on that first. And then with a series, you can do that for each installment, and then you do a big one for the whole series. And that'll help you to understand whether you're structuring it properly with like how information is being disseminated and how characters are developing over time. Because, for a longer series, especially a trilogy, you really need to understand like the whole giant arc and also the mini arcs inside of it. That's one tip.
Good tip. Someone just asked, I can answer this question, when is the book come out? Chosen Ones is already out. You can buy it right now. And if you missed that one, maybe you're just tuning in, a quick reminder, this is Inverse Happy Hour, an Instagram live show. I'm Jake, and this is Veronica Roth, and we're taking some more questions. Someone else wanted to ask, are there any new characters in Chosen Ones who you think are similar to characters from your previous stories?
I'm sure they are. I just don't know.
Sure.
Yeah. Like there's a couple kind of like types, I love to have like some best friend banter, so I'm sure there's some commonalities there with like characters in Tekka in Carve the Mark strikes me as similar to Esther in certain ways. That won't make sense to anyone but me.
Well, soon they'll all get it,
Yeah. So, I don't know. They probably do have stuff in common, but at this point, I think I'm too close to this book to really determine whether I've like echoed them directly. So someone else will have to tell me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Another question, are there any other genres you're interested in writing in?
That's a good question. It hasn't happened yet. I once had an editor ask me like, oh, would you write contemporary YA, which is like, YA, but without spaceships. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. Like, I don't know what happens in real life. Like, if there's no, Because they're not like running for their lives. Like I have no idea what people do, even though I did it, as a teenager. So
Sure.
right now, I mean, what I've always read is science fiction and fantasy, and so I can see myself playing around in that category and on the
Mhm.
fantasy side and on the sci-fi side. But for the most part, I follow my gut, and my gut says this is where I want to be.
That's good. That's cool. That matters. So this one, I feel like I've got this question on a lot of these videos, and it is, which Hogwarts house do you think you would be in?
This is like the personality test for our times, isn't
It
it?
really is. It really is.
I like it. I'm a Hufflepuff.
Okay. I respect it. I feel like also a bit of a Hufflepuff vibe personally. I think
Yeah,
it's like if you're like a chill person, that's like the way to go.
I'm not that chill.
Oh, and maybe I don't know, maybe not. What
What
is it about
what
Hufflepuff for you?
Oh, they're loyal and they work hard.
Okay, those are both true. I like it.
Well, what do you identify as usually though?
I mean, I generally go Hufflepuff. I think when I was like younger, I was very into Slytherin because I was like a little bit of like a villain streak.
Yeah.
But
Everyone wants
as
to be
I
a bad
chilled
boy.
out, yeah, as I chilled out. Um, and I guess aside from your books, of course, are there any other books or shows or movies that you really love that you'd recommend to people, especially right
Yes.
now as we're all like looking for things to keep ourselves busy?
Yeah. So I've discovered that under quarantine, some people are engagers, which means that they want
Hmm.
to deal with the darker parts of life.
Hmm.
I am a disengager and I want distraction. So for
Yeah.
me, this is the time to get immersed in some fantasy. Um,
Hmm.
And so I recommend there's a great book called Mirage by Sumaya Daoud that is space Moroccans in space. It's romantic and it's also kind of about a revolution. So it's got everything. I love that book. And also the last book that really sucked me in was Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Um, it's like necromancers in space and it's kind of a mystery. It's very funny and I loved it.
Cool.
Yeah. Mhm. And the last one I think is if you haven't read the Old Kingdom series by Garth Nix, you should. It starts with Sabriel. Those books are great. They hold up. I read it when I was a kid, and it's you know I can't even talk about it. So good. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, I think just one more question, and then we're gonna have to run. And this thing also I've also been asking everyone, which is just what do you think is the role of sci-fi, fantasy, fiction in general at a time like this when things are a little uncertain, we're all a little maybe a little scared. What what purpose does it serve?
Well, I think it can be many things. So to me, science fiction and fantasy have always been it's a safe place to engage with ideas. So people think of it as kind of like purely escapist. Well, fantasy more than sci-fi, but I think of it as purely escapist, and I just don't think that that's really true. What it does is creates a distance for you so that when you enter a story, you don't feel like oppressed or threatened by it, and you can consider the ideas in it. Science fiction in particular has served as kind of a mirror for us. It shows us the problematic things that
Yeah.
we do and what they might look like in the future. And but I also think it does that by taking you on a ride and on an adventure. So to me, it's a very important genre for right now because it can comfort you and take you to another world, which is great. We all need that right now. But it can also like help you to engage with some deeper ideas, which you know is always nice. So always a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, there's a good mix of escape and thoughtful reflection on the world.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I
Yeah,
really
same.
love talking to you. And if you enjoyed this, you should buy Veronica's book, Chosen Ones, and you should follow her on Instagram or follow Inverse on Instagram. And be sure to check out the next episode of Inverse Happy Hour, which is tomorrow at 7 p.m. Thank you so much, Veronica, and
Yeah,
cheers.
thank you.
Cheers.